I think you can get it on YouTube. Somebody told me that. Okay. An official welcome to our audience today, but most importantly to the two gentlemen that we're going to be interviewing. So thank you very, very much. Closest to me is Clement Simoneau and Thomas Volpe. And I've been told that you have been friends since kindergarten. Is that fact, or is that...
That's correct. That's a fact.
We are delighted to have you join us today. This is our latest initiative. This is the Plymouth Historical Society's latest initiative, and we're calling it the Memories of Plymouth. We think it's so important to be able to capture your memories, hopefully today a lot of little stories that will be meaningful to our audience. And collectively, when we put them together, it's all about what a community is. So let's begin. Let's begin. I have a series of questions, and the first few questions will be a little bit about yourselves. So Clem, if you would start, please. Tell us where you were born. Tell us where you were born and when you moved to Plymouth.
I was born in Laconia in May of '33. My father had bought a business, a bakery in Plymouth, and that's the reason why the family moved. And my 7 sisters and 5 brothers moved ahead of me because they waited for me to be born in Laconia. So after 17 days after being born, my mother and I moved to Plymouth on Winter Street. And from Winter Street, we had moved to the Sergeant Block. I don't remember anything between. Mm-hmm. And from there, we had moved to Bridge Street, where the picture of the house there.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Tom?
I was born in Plymouth at the old hospital up in West Plymouth.
Oh, Livermore.
Livermore,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said that used to be a tourist building of some kind, that the hospital.
Ah, prior to the hospital being built?
Yes, right.
We'll have to look into that, a mystery.
Well, again, but I can recall coming down the stairs after a tonsillectomy. So I was born at the Plymouth Hospital. I was brought home, and I lived on Pleasant Street until I graduated from college.
Can I ask where on Pleasant Street? Because I lived
30
on
Pleasant Street.
30 Pleasant Street.
Yes.
All right, thank you, thank you. Your parents and grandparents?
They both came out of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not know my grandparents. I met one of them once, and they lived in Canada, and my father never had a vehicle to travel to Canada, so we never got up there very often. So I really don't know the grandparents.
Mm-hmm. You talked about the business on the main street. Can you identify for the tell the audience where it was located?
It was located in the Sergeant Block, and it was a bakery. And after prohibition, my father got a beer license and changed it to a cafe. So he called it a cafe, Simoneau's Cafe, but the family always referred it to the bakery, and most of the townspeople refer to it as the bakery.
As a bakery.
And
so it would have been opposite Drapert and Maynard. Next.
Well, you know, with right in the corner of Bridge Street and Main Street.
Bridge Street and Main Street.
Well,
okay.
That's where you're. And Summer House was on the other side, and the Ralph Miles hardware store was on the other side of it.
Thank you.
Where are we? In other words, I was born and lived on Pleasant Street. What's the next question?
What business, maybe talk about your parents and your grandparents, and was there a business associated with each of them?
Okay. My mother was brought to Plymouth by Dr. Ernst. She was a graduate of Worcester Teachers College, and she came, and her first job was as a 4th grade teacher in the grade school. And then later on, I can recall that she was very friendly with, I want to say, Eva Spears. I know Dr. Spear, I think, was the superintendent of schools here, but they lived on High Street, I think. And I can remember going over there as a youngster with my mother to visit Mrs. Spear.
Wow,
So,
wow. Wow.
But anyway, my mother's maiden name was Buckley, and she obviously met my father here, and they married, and I was born, and then my sister was born 2 years or 18 months after me. So.
And your father's occupation?
He and his older brother, Angelo, became co-owners of Volpe store, which had been started by my grandfather, or actually it was a store that my grandfather had purchased, much like your father.
Yes.
I forget the family name. I think it was an Italian name that had owned the store previously, but my uncle, no, my father, my grandfather was in Laconia, and he heard the store was for sale, and he contacted his brother in Italy, had his brother come to the States and bought the store. And this is, I'm going to guess about 1912, 14, in that era.
Wow. So it's one of the older establishments in town.
I would
Absolutely,
guess it was.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I think Rand's is 1908. Gould had started that, I believe, and then Rand's took it over. So it is one of the older establishments in town. Interesting, interesting. So the two businesses where affiliate the people on our audience today will be Volpe's.
Volpe store.
Volpe store, and now Biederman's owns that establishment, and yet this was Simoneau's Cafe?
Yes.
Simoneau's Cafe. Interesting, thank you. Would you like to talk a little bit for a few minutes about your education in Plymouth?
I went from kindergarten right up through high school, and graduated in high school in '51. And I was trying to think of.
Can you remember some of the teachers that come to mind
Well,
that you might have had?
I could list my grade school teachers all the way up through 8th grade, but high school, of course, it changed around and that. But when in high school, I played sports, basketball and baseball, and
I think you told me that you may have had Tom's mother as a teacher.
Oh, well, yes, I had
Yes?
her, yeah, as an English teacher, yes. Yes, I had 2 years of her, actually 3 years. The freshman year twice, and the sophomore year I had to take it over with my sophomore year. So I finally got past her.
Life was good after that.
It got better.
And can you share with the audience why you may have had to take that class twice? This is English?
English.
English.
And I got into the verbs and speech. I couldn't absorb it. I couldn't.
Because you were bilingual? You came here and you knew basically French in your family?
Well, my family was all French, yes.
French.
But I moved because they moved from Laconia, which was all French. But when I was born, of course, I came to Plymouth, so I was never exposed to any of the schools that they went through. And they had problems there because of their language going through school, and most of my older brothers and sisters didn't graduate. I don't know, I'm sure that had something to do with that.
So language was a barrier at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Sure, sure. Tom?
I shared with Clem. I can remember going to his house. I think I was preteen, but his mother would be in the kitchen cooking, and she would try to converse with me in English, and of course it was difficult for her, but I can remember it.
Wow, wow.
That was a few years ago.
Interesting, interesting story. Businesses. I have a question here that said, did you work during, where did you work during your major working years?
Well, my major years, I went in the Navy for 4 years after graduation. I went from '51 to '55. After returning home, I stayed in Plymouth for a short period of time and moved to Michigan. And that's where I married my wife, Georgia Batchelder. And I worked out there, the Northfield Training School. This was a school for most of the people, they were slow learners. And I was actually like a babysitter. I worked 8-hour shift, taking care of the kids when they went in school. And from there, I moved back to Plymouth in '61, and then I without a job with 3 children, and didn't know what to do, but I wanted to move out of Michigan because I was near Detroit, and I didn't want my children to be brought up around the city. So, but a month after I moved to Plymouth, I started at Sprague Electric. They had just started the year before,
Yes.
and the big year was '61. So I was employed as the specification engineering as a clerk, and I worked there through '69, and then I moved to Sanford, Maine. They had the plant there. They had started one there, and I ended up staying there for 34 years with them and retired as the manager of the spec engineering department.
So Sprague Electric was one of our bigger
It was really big.
employers in the
At one
town.
time, I think Plymouth had 600 or 800 people working, and over in Sanford they get up to about 12, 14. Plymouth wasn't big enough to manufacture everything they needed, so they started another plant in Sanford, and then our department transferred over there to Sanford.
All right, thank you. Tom?
What are we talking about?
The business. What
Okay.
kind of business are you affiliated with?
Oh, okay. Well, actually, as a youngster, I worked in a family store. In those days, you had 5-cent deposit returns, so they would bring in the tonic bottles and the beer bottles, and they'd lug them downstairs in these big bushel baskets, and I'd have to put them back in the cases down there. But did that as a youngster. Even in the high school, I did that. So.
And then eventually what have you been doing the last?
In high school, I did go to work for Blake's restaurant that was across the alley from Volpe's store, and I peeled potatoes down in the basement most of the time, but I did that for a summer.
But eventually, did you go into the insurance business?
Well, that's a long time after. Actually, when I got into college, one of the summer jobs I had was for the ice house, and I had a ice route, and I went up to North Woodstock, and I went up to Rumney, up to Stinson Lake, around to Hebron. I guess that's about it.
Can you tell us where the ice house was located?
Yes. It was located just south of what is now Mayhew's Funeral Home. And as a matter of fact, Mayhew's Funeral Home is situated on land that was owned by my grandfather. He lived on Fox Street, which is, Volpe in English means fox. I don't think there's any relationship, but Fox's Pond was where they harvested ice, and where I spent my childhood fishing for trout.
So that became part of the Park and Recreation Center for us as kids.
Yes, yeah.
We learned to swim and to dive there. So the ice preceded that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Would you share with the audience what business you have been involved with, though?
Well, as an adult now, I ultimately, after 2 years in the service, I went to work for the New Hampshire Insurance Company. And after a 6 months training program, they sent me to Boston, where I ultimately met an older man who asked me to come back to New Hampshire with him. And we bought an agency in Laconia that is now 152 years old. It's the second oldest continuous business in the city of Laconia.
Wow.
And I'm very proud of that.
Oh my gosh, you should be.
And I'm only the third layer of ownership in 150 years.
Wow.
Which blows my mind.
Yeah, that is amazing. Were you in the service, Clem?
Yes, I was in the Navy for 4 years.
And were you stationed?
I was stationed in Newport, Rhode Island for 2 years, and in the last 2 years I was on a cruiser, USS Northampton. Now, while I was in the service, I was going to a firefighting training school and learning how to put out fires. And at the end, we had to go through a smoke chamber. We had these OBAs to go through the smoke and see how it felt walking through and still be able to breathe. And the end of it was the instructor had to put out these smudge pots with water, with a hose, and for some reason the water hit the smudge pot and a ball of fire came out the door. And there was 8 of us there, and we were all burnt. The instructor died from it. And I received skin grafts on my left leg, and my hands and face was burnt. And so I was in the hospital for 5 months, went back to duty, and then after 2 years there, and then 2 years on the ship.
Were you affiliated with any war at the time?
Korean War was going at the time, so I was there from 51, and Korean War I think ended in 54, something like that. So that's, but I was on the East Coast. I was not on the West Coast for where my ship was. We went to the Mediterranean, but only, and then after that I got discharged and back to Plymouth for a month, and then to Michigan.
Thank you, thank you.
I would like to inject into here that I can recall that he had a great deal of the rear of his leg burned, and he had skin grafts. But they did it multiple. It seemed to me that they did it in small squares.
It was postage stamp, they called it.
Yeah.
And they put on,
They
they
do a
took the
few-
skin from the upper part of my leg and cut it in pieces and then attached it to there.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was something new they were trying, or it was very new.
Were you in the service?
Yes, I spent 2 years in the Army, and interestingly enough, I ended up in New York City, which is very unusual. I was in military intelligence, and I had what they call civilian status, so I didn't wear a uniform for a year and a half. And I married and brought my wife there.
Oh.
And she was quite awed by the confusion and the traffic, but it was a wonderful education for a couple of country kids. So, and then just by coincidence, I got this job after the service with the New Hampshire Insurance Company, and
And the
here
rest
I
is
am.
history.
Yes.
Right, right. If I asked you to reflect on your time as a youth in Plymouth, what would you share with the audience? If I asked you to reflect on your time as a young person growing up in Plymouth, what comes to mind?
Well, I know I spent most of the summers down on the Pemmy River fishing. I was down there mostly all summer long, just doing a lot of fishing and just hanging around. Played around the tracks, because the railroad went between your place and our house, and used to just go back and forth in the tracks, and
You couldn't have eaten the fish from
no,
the Pemmy
no,
River.
I don't want to tell you, but the fish were poisoned. It was polluted from the mill up in Lincoln,
And what did some people do every night after supper? What did they take down to and throw into the river?
Oh,
Garbage?
everybody on the I say everybody on the street. There's 4 or 5 houses there, going down Bridge Street, and people would grab the trash for the day or a couple of days, put it in the bag, and walk down to the bridge and drop it over
And that was
into the river.
acceptable behavior then?
And nobody was sad. I mean, the river was polluted anyways, but the idea was trash going down too. But in the wintertime, of course, it froze over, and then you see big piles of trash sitting on the ice there until they melted, and the river opened up in the spring.
Interesting.
But
Tom,
What am I supposed to be talking about?
we're going to be talking about your time as a youth in Plymouth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, a couple instances that I would like to share, and that is that quite a few of our classmates were from Rumney, Wentworth, and Warren, and they commuted to school on the railroad. So they came down on the milk train, they went home on the paper train, or whatever they called them, but it was 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So a lot of those kids got out of school at 2:30 and 3 o'clock. They had 2 or 3 hours to kill, so they'd get down to Volpe store and play pool. And that's what they did, a lot of the kids.
So you're telling me at the bottom of Volpe's there was a pool table?
2 pool tables.
2 pool
Yes,
tables.
yeah.
And there
I
was,
think they paid 25 cents a game. That's how they played. I can't quite remember. But
according to something that I just read, there was also something else underneath.
A bowling alley.
A bowling alley.
Yes. That never ran when I saw it. The bowling was done in the evenings and maybe weekends. But Floyd Burt, who I talked about, he was a pin keeper.
Was he?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
They used to sit down there up on a high bench there, and after the balls had been thrown down, and then they'd go down, and set the pins back up again. Now that was candle pin bowling. It was a thin,
Yeah, okay.
as opposed to the 10 pin. That's right.
Interesting.
But that's what they did.
So if we went underneath today, would it still be there? Evidence.
Yeah, I don't think so. I went down there one time after it was Biederman's, and I don't recall that there was any evidence. I do recall that it was a wood that they tilted the wood up on end, and then glued it together, and then sanded it, and then shellacked it or did something to it. But
Maybe I'll just have to knock on their doors.
I just bring up when he said about him coming down from Romney and Wentworth and on the train. We never really had snow days because people were able to get to the school. Most of the town's kids were walkers, and then of course the train brought them in the town. So we really rarely had a snow day during all the school years at the high school.
Wow. I don't think I can remember them either having snow days when I went to school. Not many. Not many.
and we'd have snowbanks that would be 6 feet high.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a lot of snow in those days. The snowfall, in my opinion, was heavier then than it is today.
Interesting, interesting. You had a story that you shared once on the phone with me. It was about one of the snow. The snow was pushed down close to the bridge.
Oh, well, the town used to, when they would pick up the snow going down through Main Street and then side streets, they would dump the snow right next to the bridge, and it would go out, and then at the end of the winter there, it would go out at least halfway across the river. That's how much snow they dump there. So, getting to the little story about that, when the spring came and the snow washed down the river, there was still some snow on the banks of the river on this side. So, I would go down and go across the pile of snow and looking for coins, because the sun would hit the coin, but it wouldn't melt the snow underneath it, so they would kind of like stick up like a sore thumb. And I would find coins that way. I'm not saying I got rich that way. I might have found 3 or 4 or whatever it was, but I had done that.
That's like some of the children that used to go to the fair the day after it closed down, and they would search the grounds.
Yeah.
Well, the theater always had a double feature on Saturday.
Correct.
And I think the fee was 12 cents. So we'd go down and we'd walk the roads in downtown Laconia looking for beer bottles and soda bottles. And we'd take them in, cash them in, 5 cents for the quarts and 2 cents for the smaller ones, or 10 or 12 ounces, whatever they were. So we'd get enough money to go to the movies.
I used to bum, but for my father, I get money to go to the movies. Dad, can I have 12 cents to go to the movies?
12 cents.
And my brother wants to go too, so can I have another 12 cents? Think money's growing on trees?
In those days, they had these cereals. You know, you had Captain Marvel and this and that. The Durango Kid, his family became clients of mine in Laconia because their family, the Starretts, owned a cottage on Dockham Shore on Lake Winnipesaukee. And I can remember, as a matter of fact, there was a firm in Athol, Massachusetts, I believe, called Starrett Tool, and it was the family. And the Durango Kid was this Charles Starrett. He was a member of that family.
Wow. So. We have a celebrity in our midst. As you grew up in the town, is there a memory or two that comes? Can you think of something that happened in the town that just resonated with you? Putting you on the spot. Some kind of a disaster, some kind of an event, some fun, the best of the best?
Well, of course, the comes to me is when the O'Brien block burnt, the big fire in '43, I believe it was. And I lived on Bridge Street, and when I went outside when the fire was going, and I could feel the heat from that. It wasn't that far, but I could feel the wind must have blown the heat. And I was watching the church, Methodist church, and I see the
there
steeple.
was a church there too.
Yes,
Right,
yeah, the steeple, and I said, well, I'm going to watch it fall. And I figured it's going to fall over. Well, what it did, it fell straight down. I think the bell was there and everything. The weight of it must have just do it right straight down to the church, and that was quite a fire. And it was. And the other fire is as I lived over the bakery at the Sergeant Block, there was a fire in the back of the building. There was a repair shop back there, and I could just vaguely remember seeing the flames from it. That would have been probably 38, 39 before we moved to Bridge Street. That's as that goes.
Wow.
Another thing that I remember is during the summertime, they had band concerts, and they were free to the public, and they had the bandstand there. I think it was either Friday or Saturday night, and you'd go down, and we'd get popsicles and hang around and listen to the music. And the director of the band was a gentleman by the name of Freeman.
Harold?
Harold Freeman,
Harold
yes,
Freeman.
and he lived on Pleasant Street, right down the street from me. So I remember that very well. And they'd go in Volpe store amongst the other stores, and they had a freezer there, and you'd get these popsicles. They came in 2 pieces that you'd break them apart, and you'd.
I don't know if they have a popsicle that's 2 pieces anymore, or
Yeah.
they're singular.
Now they're
Right.
single, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. The band concert was started by Mr. Keniston, who was a surveyor of town, but also a director of music in the area. And then Harold Freeman took over after him. And they still have band concerts here on Wednesday nights.
Yeah, really.
I think the one coming up may be a tribute to the Beatles.
Now, there's a Keniston that lived over on the corner of Garland Street and Langdon Street. His daughter's name is Louise, and she's a personal friend of my sister's. But I wondered if he'd be any relation then to the Keniston who was connected with the band concert.
I'm
going to see
I don't
Louise within the next couple months. I'm going to ask her.
So you can report back to us. You can
Okay.
report back to us. Were both of you, when you were in high school or middle school, what kind of activities did you enjoy doing? You could have been involved maybe with sport, traditional sport that they would have offered, or maybe something more recreational?
Yeah, when we were in 7th and 8th grade, Vernon Smith started a basketball, winter basketball, and Tom and I were playing in the 7th grade and 8th grade. And then when I went into high school, I played basketball and I played baseball for 4 years. And I was saying to my kids that all our home games were away, except in baseball. All our home games were away, and his football games were all away, because it was in Holderness, and Plymouth was, so it wasn't in town when we played our games.
Interesting. And what's the reason it was in Holderness?
Because we didn't play in Plymouth, we had to play in Holderness in another town, so we never really had what you call a home game in Plymouth.
So we didn't have the facilities here at the
No,
time.
Is that right?
No, we went to the D&M Park.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Boy, I'm slow. Absolutely.
So I was just something to think about. That
That's
just
right.
trivia.
When we had activity, physical education class, we would be in the Guy E. Spear building, but we'd have to run across to the D&M Park to have any activity because we didn't
Yes.
have the space for it. You're correct.
In football, we used to suit up in the basement of the high school and
Yeah,
then walk
and
down
walk.
High Street and then over Bridge Street over to D&M Park.
And baseball, same thing, had to walk across.
Well, we were blessed to have a facility donated to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. That was great.
I would also like to share, ultimately I bought an old, well-established insurance agency in Plymouth, Air Agency, and they had a picture of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig coming to Plymouth, and as a promotion for D&M Draper and Maynard. I think Babe Ruth had his raccoon coat on, and I still have that today.
You have the picture.
Yes, yeah. It's in the Plymouth office, but we have it.
If I asked you what major This might be difficult because you no longer live here. You live in Laconia, Tom, correct?
Yes.
And you live in
Sanford, Maine.
Sanford, Maine. So if I asked you what changes you've seen in town over the decades when you were living here to now, you still come back to visit,
Right.
business, etc. What changes might come to mind?
Well, I went through town this morning, coming here, and I couldn't believe, I didn't recognize the main street. There's so many different businesses there. And so there had to be a lot of changes in the last 8 years, or well, I lived since 61.
So the names of the businesses have changed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I can go back when they were originally, when I was growing up, what the businesses were. But and I could go right up Main Street and right up through the Plymouth Theater.
Well, we're going to tap you once again, I'm sure, for another project. That would be an interesting one.
All main streets, I think, throughout the United States have changed. With shopping centers today, I know even in Laconia, when I started in business there in 1959, it got so I knew all the shopkeepers up and down the street. That was the center of town. And many of the merchants were on the city council. They ran for mayor. So the business community was very much in leadership roles throughout the community. And that's changed in Laconia, and I suspect it's changed in Plymouth too. Because you walk up and down Main Street in Plymouth today, and I don't recognize anything as it's enduring the way they were in those days. So the downtown area was the focal point of the community, and that was true in Laconia, and I'm sure it's true in Plymouth.
I think you're right. It's happening all across the country, especially with the smaller towns, of which we are one. I want to change gears a little bit. Was there a person in your lifetime that really affected you, that meant something to you, maybe mentored you someplace? It could be a teacher, it could be a parent, it could be a sibling.
Could be my friend here.
Oh, that's...
He did. He had a lot of influence on me.
And you've been friends since kindergarten?
Kindergarten, right up through high school.
And you've kept in touch since kindergarten?
Yeah.
We served on the altar together.
That's right. We were altar boys. And
did you play sports together? Is that
did.
why you
well,
connected?
I didn't play football, but he played all three sports. And
And we both value those days.
I
mean, we
had a good time.
still think of them.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat. This is a long time. How many years have you been friends? Can you do that?
It's got to be 75 years.
Take 5.
Yeah.
75. No, 79. 5 years old. We're 84.
Yes.
So 79 years.
Wow. And Tom, outside of Clem, is there somebody that may have mentored you or meant something to you that was important in your life?
Not so much when I was a youngster as as an adult. I came to Laconia, and there was an attorney there who became my corporate attorney. And I know we had a symposium through Laconia Savings Bank then. It's now Bank of New Hampshire. But they asked us, was there any individual that was of high impact to you? And I ultimately thought of this gentleman, Arthur Niswander, who was an attorney in Laconia. He was county attorney, he was city solicitor, he was very much a benefactor to the town. And it was during that symposium that they had that I came to realize that he was a man that I looked up to and had the attributes that I felt were conducive to good citizenship.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Did you have a favorite hangout as a youngster? Was there someplace fun that you wanted to go, to have a good time? What would it be? Wasn't there something that it might have been affiliated with school?
I remember I used to go up to Avery's Field and play a little football, touch football. I guess it was touch. Did we tackle?
We kind of did.
I think so, yeah. And but
baseball too up there.
Yeah, I was going to say baseball. And during growing up years.
One thing that I would call attention to is in Laconia today, they have neighborhood playgrounds. And I would have given my eye teeth when I was a kid to have, you know, a asphalt court to play basketball or practice basketball, baseball diamonds, and Laconia's got 5 of them. And I drive by there and I say, I can't believe that those things are available to the citizenry. That we had to get out of D&M Park.
No, that's it. Yeah. And no outside basketball hoops, you know, around the schools and that. Had nothing like that.
Right.
Just playgrounds.
So more opportunities, you think, for the young folks of today?
Today.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Interesting. I think I've asked a little question. We talked about the main street, but are there any stores in particular that were here when you were growing up that no longer are here? A restaurant, a business, and maybe when one came in, what excited you when a business came in, but what saddened you when a business left us, is no longer? Anything come to mind?
Well, I think after the fire at O'Brien's block, yeah, those businesses came in. Fraser's Diner, Fraser's Hardware, and O'Brien's, and I guess it was Guy's that came in there. But really, the town didn't change that much. Because see, I was only here 18 years, and other than that, there wasn't that major changes I can think of. And
A couple things I can think of. One was during fireworks, 4th of July, Rand's hardware store had a big supply of fireworks. And we'd go in there and you'd buy these long chains of crackers, and they weren't very expensive. And of course, in those days, kids were blowing their hands off. There were injuries, but that's it. Well, now it's I think fireworks are unlawful. They have special stores that sell them, but they're not like it was. We used to have cherry bombs and everything else that we had when we were kids. They don't do that today.
You're just coming up with another story. I'm recollecting a story that you shared before, a celebration of World War II. What did Plymouth do to celebrate the end of World War II?
Well, at the intersection of the Center Rotary Park there, down in front of Newberry's, and then would be the Congo Church and the courthouse there, they started a bonfire. It was a kind of a 3-way intersection there. And I know they took old fruit cakes and vegetable racks from Volpe store and cut them up and started this huge bonfire.
Wow.
And that was after VJ Day, I guess, that the war was over. And I can remember that.
You were there. You actually saw this.
I did.
yeah, I was there too. I remember that. And I don't know if it was VE Day or VJ Day. I don't know which one it was.
Oh, you have to teach me.
Because
What's the
there was
difference between V-Day and VG
Victory
Day?
in Europe and victory in Japan.
Yeah, they were declared at different times. In other
Yeah,
words, the
right,
Germans
in May, I think, and then
surrendered earlier
August.
than the Japanese did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I don't know which bonfire
I think
that
it was Japanese.
It might have been
June,
there at the
I
end
think.
of the Second
Yeah.
War. Yes,
Yeah.
I know there was 2 of them, but I know my twin brothers had some 5-inch firecrackers, and my brother-in-law got a hold of them and went up to the bonfire and thrown them in the bonfire there that exploded to the firecrackers.
I asked you if you could find something in the house that you wanted, in your houses, that you wanted to share with us today and to bring something. Clem, would you mind sharing the picture that you have in front of you now and explaining to the audience?
This is my family. There was 13 of us, and plus my mother and father. And this was back in 42, I believe, or 43. This is the only time the family ever got together in all the years we were together. And shortly after this photo was taken, the twins had to go back on the train back to their base, and then my brother, who was still in the Army, he had to leave. So after that, that's the last time we ever were together.
And would you like to point to where you are, please?
I'm the one that's sitting right over here.
So you're the youngest?
I'm the youngest. And then my brother over here.
Is that Connie with the uniform?
That's Connie with the uniform, and then the twins right here.
And a lot of people in the audience would know these two.
Yeah, Henrietta and Irene. And
So that's Henrietta Miller
Teresa
and Irene
and
Wilkie.
and Loretta.
All right.
And then my sister Edith,
And this is mom and dad.
mom and dad.
And mom and dad.
Yeah.
Thank you for
That's
doing
my
that.
oldest one. Yeah.
13 children. She had 17 born.
Yeah, I was 17th born. Now this is the back side of the family house on Bridge Street. This is the front. It's kind of a dark photo. And then this is the back side. That shows how big the house was. And it held I don't know, 5 or 6 bedrooms.
And it's no longer there.
It's no longer there.
No longer
it's
there.
gone. And
The street is
the
actually
street
gone.
It's gone. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that. Tom, do you have anything that you want
I
to
do.
share with us?
I do.
Okay.
These are pictures of Volpe store. And that's the interior
Oh, it's
of the
incredible.
store. Glass cases in those days for display. And primarily candies and confectionery. But, and then the canned goods and cereals were around the perimeter in high shelves. And you used to have these instruments that had a fork on the end of them, and you could reach up and grab and bring it down.
Oh, I think they make those now.
Yes.
They probably could. I haven't
think
seen
they've
one for
re-
years, but anyway, that's one picture. This right here is a picture of the bowling alley and the
That's incredible. And
pool
pool
tables.
tables.
Yes, yeah.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
And I'm going to leave for the Historical Society a picture of the exterior of the store.
Volpe Brothers Confectionery and Fruit. And who would be the folks? Do you know the folks in the
Well,
front?
you know, I really don't, but I suspect that's going to be my grandfather on extreme right as we look at it, and then either my father or one of my 2 uncles, the youngster, and then his brothers get to be, I suspect, is one of the 2 men in the rear, but I don't know which one. Interestingly enough, I didn't really know my grandfather's brother. He'd had his own store for a while, and I had been in there a couple times. But now, as a older married man, I've reacquainted myself. Their children came to me in Laconia and said, "We're your cousins," and we've become friendly again.
That's
after all
great.
these years. As a matter of fact,
That's great.
they are my sister and my only living relatives today. They're second cousins.
Wow. That's
And they're
wonderful.
the family that have donated the pictures to the Plymouth Historical Society. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Did you have a D&M glove? I saw it someplace. A D&M.
Yes, I do. I have a
Oh, over there, Tom. We're hanging up over there.
the
Right by my cane, so.
that's a golf club. No, it's right. No, it's hanging. That's
Yeah,
it.
there you go.
That's great.
Thank you. This is a. Now I don't think it was made in Plymouth, but it's a Draper and Maynard golf club, and it was of a set that my father had, and then he gave it to me, and I gave it to my brother-in-law, and he left us on his boat on the ocean, and it kind of chewed on the set. But that's a stainless steel iron, and it's got Draper and Maynard's logo on the back of it there.
And when Draper and Maynard first started, they were jobbing out the golf club line.
Yes.
It wasn't until Mr. Miller came in 27 and he took over. And Mr. Miller, his son, worked in the establishment, and most of us would know Miss Miller. She was my 3rd grade teacher, so that family is associated with golf. So it was jobbed out in the beginning, but then they started to make it over at the Common Man area, I believe.
Oh.
Interesting, interesting. I have one more question I'd like to ask of each of you. If you were to share something, if you had a group of young folks around, what possibly might you give them for advice about the town in which you live, or maybe overall communities in which you've been living?
I would say, well, I was thinking in the past, respect for each other. I think there's too much of this going on where there's not enough respect for people, and I think it would be lots better, and the world would be lots better, have a lot of respect for everybody.
Beautiful, thank you.
I agree with Clem. It's my observation that we don't communicate as freely today as when he and I were youngsters. And I think it's because lifestyles have changed. Now, when we were kids, we played kick the can and hide and seek in neighborhood. In my business, we go into homes today and people don't even know their neighbors. And so we're not getting the communication of the community the way we used to. And I would argue that we don't have time to smell the roses today because of lifestyle and the changes that we had when Clem and I were young.
That's neat.
And I value that very much. I don't know about Clem, but I think that it was valuable to us.
Well, I want to thank you. The hour felt like it was 10 minutes for me being together. So thank you for sharing your memories today. I hope you've enjoyed the time as much as I did. I'm the fortunate one. I'm the one that gets to chat with you beforehand and during. These stories are really important. Our memories are important. The pictures that you brought in today that we associate with memories are important. And as you just said, respect is important. For me, it's community, and I would assume you say the same thing. Absolutely. We forget what our community is all about, maybe our part in the community, and it's the importance of giving back to one's community. So I hope you will allow me to shake your hand one more time.
Oh, yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Pleasure.
Pleasure.
You know, from a civic perspective, when we were in grade school, they used to take us to the town meeting that was held in the gym at the grade school. And people could stand up and they could express themselves, and everybody kept still, and they respected everybody's right to speak their piece. And we've become a polarized nation today, and they're not, as Clem says, they don't show the respect for, you know, we're all equal citizens, and it should show in our deportment in the public. But
thank you. Words of wisdom to finish up on. I appreciate
and you know,
that.
it's gone to our Congress, and Congress now does not show that level of respect and ability to converse and to compromise that was done and readily accepted when we were young.
Well done. I want to thank you again for coming. It's really been my pleasure, and your willingness to share what a special place Plymouth was in your lifetime, in my lifetime, and I believe others will say the same thing. Thank you.
You're welcome.